a lot of times at a major championship, the golf course becomes the star of the show. And while we talk through LACC, which is a phenomenal place, I'll share my screen. We've got some flyover stuff. We've got some course key stats modeling that we can do. But how are you starting to break down and assess this golf course and then relate that to players that we think are going to have a good week at it?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a bit of an unknown. I mean, I know as each day goes by, we get a little bit more information, and we have a general understanding of what the construct of this course is. But I personally, I'm looking for players who have kind of everything in the bag. I mean, that's what we expect with the major championship, especially the U.S. Open. We're expecting length off the tee in terms of like what might be necessary. I think there might be some argument there between whether or not you really need to be long here. But that's certainly what I'm gunning for. I'm looking at off the tee in this tournament, in this U.S. Open, more than I have in quite some time. So it's something I'm definitely taking a look at. Of course, I'm looking at a lot of the global stats that we can see on rickrungood.com, like the weighted tee to green stuff. I'm very much interested in, of course, weighted approach and things of that nature as well. So, yeah, I'm looking for some length off the tee. I'm looking for the all-around game because I do think it will be tough. I mean, the green complexes in particular look like they're going to be tough to land, and that's part of the reason I'm looking for length off the tee, so you get those shorter irons in, because I do think those green complexes will be tricky in terms of keeping the ball on the green.
Yeah, I think what is most interesting about the off the tee play around LACC. First off, it's a George Thomas design. He did Riviera, he did Bel Air. I mean, this is it's unbelievable. And they did this restoration a couple of years ago. The fairways are wide, but they are effectively much smaller because of the way it cambers and the way that it angles. And if you're on, I don't want to say the wrong side, but if you're on the not ideal side of the fairway, you could have a lot of blind shots to green. So there is kind of this connection between off the tee and approach play that I think doesn't show up at a lot of other places as strongly as it's going to show up here at LACC. And there's just a lot of commitment that you're going to have to make to these shots. There's just a lot of like blind shots. And some of the features are really only unique to LA, Sia, because it's built on this canyon. I'm not sure there's a lot of, I have a couple in mind, but I'm not sure there's a lot of super strong comps for LACC.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. I'm kind of going in a little blind sort of without the comps, because I don't want to kind of, and Rick, I'd be curious to see where your comps are, but I don't want to go in with a comp and then just kind of lend it too much credence. So I'm just trying to take a look at what this course has to offer. And by the way, you mentioned something about, you could be in the fairway and, you're thinking your guy's going to, have something kind of nice in on approach in terms of like have a good shot to stick it. And it just might not happen because of some of the angles that you might deprive yourself of if you were in the wrong part of the fairway. And that, for the record, is another thing I'm looking at. Greens in regulation. Like, I do want to check that out. And there are some players that really flash with greens in regulation in terms of guys I like for this tournament.
I think it's got a little bit of Riviera in it. I think it's got a little bit of Shinnecock in it. I think it's got, the Barranca on the front nine is something you'll hear about all week. It's this drive riverbed that kind of goes and weaves itself in and out of the front nine. I think that reminds me a little bit of the Creek at Oak Hill. It reminds me a little bit of Kiowa, where if you're kind of in the hard pan at Kiowa, you're just kind of at the mercy of whatever you get, right? It might run for a while. You might be in a footprint. You might get a good lie. I think that's kind of the way the Barranca is going to play as well. I did also whip up. So this is my website. We'll show you my website, rickrungood.com here. The course key stats model, which Sia, when I have to do this for major championships without any history, I have to get a little bit creative and I have to put my hand in it a little more than I would like. So what I did is I took some pieces of this golf course, other USGA setups, some GPS measurements, some insights that we're getting from the grounds, things like that. And it ends up working out to a model that, as you can imagine, is pretty heavy off the tee, pretty heavy from tee to green. I mean, these USGA setups, I don't think there's going to be as much thick rough around like fairways. I think that's going to come into play more around the greens, but it's going to be a firm, fast test on the West Coast, which I'm stoked about.
Absolutely. And I actually like what I'm seeing in terms of these correlated stats to success, because, like I said earlier, off the tee is something I'm going to be looking at. Driving distance, which of course is correlated with that, something I'm going to be looking at. Strokes gained tee to green, weighted tee to green is something I've been looking at all season to my benefit. Around the green play, I have that sort of, for me, I have that sort of baked into the weighted tee to green. And typically I'm not looking at it separately unless I'm just trying to make sure I fade out the guys that are really, really bad. But that certainly makes sense that you might want to take a second look at around the green here. But honestly, all these stats that seem to be correlated with this course, LACC, they make a lot of sense to me.
The one thing I'll also kind of point out is, for a long time, in the year leading up to a major championship, especially at a new venue, you get a lot of like narratives, and you get a lot of like, oh, well, Colin Morikawa is a West Coast guy, he's a California guy, and Patrick Cantlay and Max Homa is one in California. It's just like, yes, I will. There's going to be two kind of distinct features. First off, you've got Bermuda grass around this place, and then the greens are bent, which, it's not that Poana that you see a lot on the West Coast, where you hear the arguments that, oh, well, Max Homa is just better on Poa than anybody in the world, right? So yeah, maybe Max Homa has a great week. Yeah, maybe Colin Morikawa has a great week, but I do want to caution people from just making that very easy connection, which might not necessarily be super true.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's a completely different sort of setup when it comes to the grass and the greens and things of that nature. So yeah, they might still benefit from being out here and being comfortable and being somewhat, maybe even somewhat more familiar with this bent grass, for example, than some of the others that are traveling. But at the same time, for me, it's not something I'm looking at.